Most of us recognize that we are individual persons, having our own unique experiences, perceptions, thoughts, feelings, and so on. We recognize that as individuals, we have inherent personal freedom. That is, we understand that no one owns us, that no one has control over how we think or what we feel. Even when it would seem that others are in control of our thoughts and emotions, ultimately it's our choice to accept or reject that influence. Of course, there are a great number of restrictions which others have tried to place upon us, whether we're talking about government, religion, parents, teachers, society, lovers, and the like. And often we resent them for it because we know deep down that they have no right to force their obligations upon us. We know that ultimately the only real restrictions upon our freedom are those we consent to, those we ultimately place upon ourselves. And even when we consent to restrictions, it's only because we have the free will to do so. There are those in this world who believe that they have the right to control others, to rule over and inhibit the freedom of others. Because of their self-centeredness, their egotism, and false sense of privilege, they believe themselves superior, that others should be subservient to them because their needs and desires are more important. This way of thinking is most noticeable among those who hold positions of political power or religious authority. But it's an insane mentality that has infected the masses as well, and in a way that is often so subtle at times that we may rarely recognize it. It may even be that we are so accustomed to it, so conditioned, that we never think to question it. When we enter into a romantic relationship, an interesting dynamic begins to unfold. And this dynamic is so deeply conditioned that we may not even think or speak about it. As soon as the relationship is established, we begin to relinquish our autonomy, our independence and individuality. We become the property of one another. We become both slave and master to one another. And it's a very strange thing when you really begin to consider it. And it presents a great deal of conflict, both internally as well as upon the external relationship. Because how can one be both master and slave at the same time? The two are diametrically opposed. There can't exist such a balance of conflicting positions. And so you'll always lean more toward one than the other, or perhaps wavering back and forth. Even if both partners begin the relationship from a seemingly equal standpoint, they will both be trying to exert their power as master over the other. That is, one is always trying to control the other, trying to manipulate, trying to change the other person to better suit their own personal desires. And this, of course, creates tensions and conflict. And this is why so many couples are always fighting. They're both trying to exert power over the other, trying to dominate the relationship, because ultimately there can really only be one master. In many cases, one partner will submit, allowing the more dominant person to seize control. The dominant one will enforce certain restrictions and boundaries upon the submissive partner, while not always necessarily adhering to the same standards and rules. The dominant partner may take upon themselves the same restrictions, but only to ensure order, because if it becomes too clear that there's a double standard, the submissive partner may decide to break the rules. But sometimes the dominant partner doesn't adhere to the same rules. They simply become very skilled at deception. They do as they please, but they try to hide it from the other. And of course, deception is very difficult to maintain and eventually becomes exposed, which again leads to conflict. In some cases, both partners want to exert control, and neither is really willing to submit to the other. Neither is willing to relinquish their power. And so after many tense struggles, they will eventually disperse and go their separate ways. But there is another way to go about relating that has nothing at all to do with domination and control. What if we can recognize instead that we are each individuals with our own inherent right to personal freedom? What if we're willing to recognize that we can be in union with one another, to come together in sharing our energy, and yet still remain independent? There's the old saying, if you love someone, set them free. But often we're afraid that if we set someone free, they'll leave us. The fact of the matter is that if someone is intent on leaving, they'll likely do it regardless of whether or not we allow them to. But more than this, we need to understand that the more we try to restrain someone, the more they will yearn for their freedom. On the other hand, if you allow someone the liberty to come and go as they please, it's more likely that they'll stick around because they appreciate the fact that you respect their freedom. And if they don't, that simply means they don't appreciate you, or maybe you're just not well suited to them, in which case, why would you want to waste your energy in a relationship that isn't going to work out anyway? In many relationships, we place a great deal of expectation and obligation upon our partners. We assign them a specific role and expect them to fulfill it according to our personal desires. We expect them to be obedient to us, to always remain close and exclusive, to stay well within well-defined boundaries, and to never deviate. We try to possess them and keep them confined. And once again, it's about exerting control. It's about taking on the roles of master and slave. This kind of relationship is intended to secure the love of our partner, to keep it from slipping away. But actually, it suffocates it. It snuffs it out. The simple reality is that love doesn't work like that. Love is not a scarce resource that one can simply extract from one another. Love is fluid like water. You can hold it in your hands so long as your hands remain open. But as soon as you try to close them, to grasp onto it, to possess it, you lose it. Love is like a flower. As soon as you cut it from its root, it begins to wither and die. If you want to enjoy the beauty of a flower, nourish it, water it, give it sunlight. To truly love someone means that you honor them for who they are, that you accept them and respect them. And if you truly respect them, you won't try to force anything upon them. You won't try to change them. You simply allow them to be as they are. And if they choose upon their own free will to share themselves with you, the exchange of energy will be authentic. It will have a certain sweetness that can't be forced, that can't be bought. The truth is that we can never truly possess the love of another person. We can capture the body, confine it to a cage, but we can't confine the heart. We can't force someone to love us. We can, however, create a safe space for love to come and dwell. We can invite it in and nurture it with kindness and compassion. And if we allow it to thrive without restraint, it will fill that space with the sweetness of its fragrance. Love is only genuine when it's free.